Hello, in this video, let's talk about solving rational inequality. So we have ratio of one polynomial divided by another, and instead of the equal sign, we now have inequality. There are three steps to solving this inequality. First, we find all the places where this inequality is equal to 0 and undefined. Then we use those answers to make an interval, and we test each interval if it's true or false. If it is true, we shade it and we will include it in our answer. If it's false, we don't shade it and we don't include it in our answer. The final step is to write the answer in interval notation. So let's go through these steps on this example. First, to find all the places where the inequality is equal to 0, we look for where the top is equal to 0. And if 3x minus 2 is equal to 0, that means that if we add 2 to both sides, we get 3x equals to 2. And to get x by itself, we divide both sides by 3, and we get x is positive 2/3. So this is the place that is equal to 0. Now, the next part is the place that is undefined. Undefined is impossible, and that happens if we try to divide by 0. So if we look at the denominator, x squared minus 1, if that happens to be 0, that would be impossible. So when does that happen? If we add 1 to both sides, we get x squared equals 1. To cancel the square, we use square root. And each time we take square root, there is plus minus in front of it because there will be two solutions. And we get square root of 1 is 1, so we get plus and minus 1. So there's two places that are impossible for our inequality, and that is plus and minus 1. Now we use those two answers from the equal sign and from the impossible. This becomes our cutoff points. So we get x-axis, and on this coordinate axis we plot our answers. So somewhere there is -1, then there is 2/3, and then somewhere there is +1. 1 and 2/3 are a lot closer to each other, but this is just a sketch. It doesn't have to be precise. So this is just an approximate position saying that 2/3 is less than 1, not that that's the same distance from -1. So now we have the intervals. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 intervals, and we test each one by choosing something here on each interval and going back to the original and seeing if it's true or false. If it comes out to be bigger than 0, it's true. Less than 0 is false. One way to do it is to actually use the calculator to get the answer a little bit faster. So let's plug in the actual question and then see what we get. 3x minus 2 divided by x to the 2 minus 1. So we can use the calculator to plug in the numbers. So if we go to the Zoom, here is our graph. And we are looking for all the places where our graph is greater or equal to 0, which is above the x-axis. So here we have our first interval is less than -1. So if we choose something that is less than -1, what are we going to get? Well, here is second, calculate, and if we want to find the y is called the value. So if we go to the value and we put something for the x that is less than -1, like -2. So if we put in -2, then here is the answer. It comes out to be -2.66. Now, is -2.66, is that greater than 0? No, no negative number is greater than 0, which means that this side of the interval is false, so we don't shade it. Now we need some point between -1 and 2/3. Well, 0 happens to be between -1 and 2/3, and if we plug in second calculate and we go to the value and we try 0, we're now getting positive value, +2. And positive numbers are bigger than 0, which makes this a true statement. So this is true, and that means from -1 to 2/3 is going to be part of our solution. Then we try something between 2/3 and 1. 2/3 happens to be 0.66 and go on forever. So we need something between somewhere like 0.7, 0.8 would be good enough. So again, let's try 0.8. That comes out to be -1 point something. Negative numbers are not greater than 0, which means it's false. So we are not going to shade that part of the interval. This piece is false. Last piece, anything bigger than 1. So if we go to calculate and try 2 for the value, we get positive 1.3. Positive numbers are bigger than 0, which makes it true. So this is true. And that means anything above 1 is also part of our solution. Now, that's the last part of the second step. We now know which intervals are going to be part of the answer, which ones are not. The last step is to write the answer as interval notation. Now, usually when we get equal sign, we use brackets. And when we don't have equal sign or we have infinity, we use parentheses. But also, the bracket means that we include that answer. And if that answer is impossible, it makes our question unsolvable, then we cannot use it, and that part will get parentheses as opposed to bracket. And -1 and +1 are exactly the places we said cannot happen. This is what makes our question undefined, these two solutions. So even though our original question came with an equal sign, we are not going to use bracket on this. We will use parentheses. So -1 gets parentheses, and a 1 gets parentheses. But 2/3 came from the equal sign, and it is possible, so that will get a bracket. Now we copy this answer in interval notation, and we are done. So parentheses, -1 goes to 2/3 with a closed bracket, and then union starts at 1, goes to plus infinity with a parenthesis. And that's the final answer to our rational inequality. And that's how to solve rational inequality using a calculator and by hand. And if there are any questions about anything, please let me know in the comments, and I'll try to do something different. Thank you for your time. Take care.